And live from cloudy southeastern Oklahoma, it is the Awesemo NASCAR Live Before Lock Pennzoil 400 show. Glad to have everybody join us this afternoon. You know me, I'm Phil. You follow me at Twitter on Race Sheets DFS. Joining me today is my buddy Chris Pennell. You follow him on Twitter at ChrisPennell16. Chris, how are we doing this afternoon?
Doing fantastic. Glad to have you as a host. Should be a good time chopping up the slate with you. And I think it's a pretty fun slate today. I know you and me both thought that in the pre-show.
Yeah, this slate seems a bit more well put together, I want to say, than last week. I mean, you know, last week we just had so much unknown because of all the drivers in the back. Plus, it was really kind of the first race in the Generation 7 car. We've got a race under our belt. I think, I think you would agree with me. We kind of feel like we know the way that this race is going to go, but I mean, anything could happen. This is NASCAR. This is a fairly worn out track. The last time that Las Vegas was paved was 2006. So, quite frankly, anything is on the table. Before we get going going today, I want to give you guys a breakdown. We are going to be going through the field, starting with the drivers 1st through 10th, then 11th through 19th. 21st through 29th, and then 30th through 37th. If you have any questions, be sure to post those in the Discord, or if you want those questions expedited and answered a little quicker, post those in the chat with a super chat and you will be given top priority. The first thing that we need to discuss today is that we have two drivers going to the back of the field for unapproved adjustments. We've got Tyler Reddick, who had a steering rack change apparently yesterday during practice and qualifying. The steering rack was giving him all sorts of trouble, and that's the amazing thing about Reddick, is that he had a steering rack issue and he was still able to post like a top 10 qualifying speed, really super fast. So if they get this fixed, then I mean it should be wheels up for him. And of course the big one, Kyle Busch, because of his wreck during practice, going to the back. Believe me, we will fully discuss Kyle Busch and every DFS implication that is involved with Busch, but that is later on in the show. Second thing we need to discuss, and it does make me a little sad, is that there is a competition caution at lap 30, so be aware of that. But in hindsight of all of the trouble that Goodyear had last year, I think it probably is for the better that the teams get to see after 30 laps just what kind of wear they're getting with these tires. And the third topic that we need to discuss, Chris, what are you looking at Dominator-wise today for cash game purposes?
So I know you talked a little bit about this article, but in your article this weekend in the preview. But for me, just looking at the past averages and everything, I am pretty much looking at two Dominator builds for the most part. And that can even be said for tournaments as well. Looking at past Vegas, or really just 1.5 mile tracks, you're typically going to see two Dominators. One guy that can lead a good chunk of the race. You might see like a medium Dominator. And a third guy may or may not be able to hit into the optimal lap. Just really depends on their price point.
Right. Okay, yeah, the two Dominator build is probably, I think, where a lot of people are leaning. I know that's where my lineups are leaning. So let's talk about the prospects of a singular Dominator. What would your lineup have to look like if you were to go down that road?
So if I'm going a single Dom build, I am probably just plugging in Kyle Larson and then trying to get some guys that offer some PD upside. Like Kyle Busch, I'm not really sure we can really classify him as a Dominator this week. I know he's kind of priced as your typical Dominator, but starting all the way back in 37th and a parts car from Hamlin, it's hard to kind of classify him as a Dominator. So if I'm going that route, I'm plugging in a guy starting close to the front, like a Christopher Bell, a Kyle Larson, and Elliott. And then I'm trying to kind of pick more towards the back, assuming that guy that we picked as a Dominator is leading a very large chunk of this race.
Okay, and if you are looking to get a little bit weirder in big tournaments, do you have any sort of eye towards a three Dominator build?
If I'm going a three Dom build, I'm going to have to find like a cheaper third guy. So throwing in guys like Tyler Reddick, even though he's going to the rear, he can be more of like a second half kind of race that dominates. But him, Alex Bowman, and just one of the cheaper guys, or be like your third Dom builds. Because I'm not going super top heavy. Like I'm not building any lineups with like Kyle Larson, Chase Elliott, and just jamming in a Joey Logano in there. I just don't like the way those look.
I agree with you. Before we go any further and start breaking down this field from 1 through 37, I want to give everybody a reminder. Give us a like. subscribe, ring that bell. Stay up to date with all the different shows that we have. Later on today, after this show, later in the afternoon, we've got 2 NBA shows coming your way. So hit that bell, know when those shows go live so that you can stay up to date with all of our latest DFS offers, our giveaways, and of course, the best research in the industry. So let's get started with drivers 1 through 10. Now, the easy path would and the softball would just be like, okay, Chris, tell me about Kyle Larson and all the ways that you love him. But we're anticipating if Kyle isn't the highest owned driver today, then he's definitely going to be in top 3 easily. I mean, the stats all love him. He won this race last year. He's coming off of a win last week, and I didn't even realize this until I saw it yesterday, is that he's won 5 of the last 7 regular season or just like regular cup races. He's on a roll. Like we don't need to convince you people watching this to play Kyle Larson. However, I want to talk about a guy that you wrote up in your GPP article over here at Awesemo.com, and that's going to be the guy starting on the pole, Christopher Bell. What is the path to Christopher Bell being optimal today?
The path is for him to hold off the menace, which is going to be Kyle Larson that's starting right beside him. And I will say I was unaware we're going to have the competition caution at lap 30, which I think does hurt him a little bit because he can easily get shuffled out. So if I knew that prior, I'd be a little bit lower on Bell, but the practice speeds were there. One of the top dogs in practice, 4th in the 5 lap, 4th in the 10 lap, 3rd in the 15 lap, which actually had a faster 15 lap run than Larson, but I'm not really putting too much into that. Larson was obviously amazing everywhere. And obviously trust Larson more, but Bell, he's got the track position to work with. We know he's on a great team, JGR in the 20 cars, so he can definitely hold his ground. He's won a race before in the Cup Series, so this is not like we have Austin Cindric the prior week where he's a rookie making his first start in the pool in the Cup Series. So while I think Bell, there's a path at $8,200 if he can lead a decent chunk of stage 1 and stay within the top 5 and pick up fast laps, it's certainly possible. But the competition caution did hurt his chances a bit.
Yeah, that is kind of the really neat thing about Bell, without getting into him being pivots off of guys that are going to be much higher owned, is that at that salary on both DraftKings and FanDuel, kind of like what you need from him in order to probably hit that top 6, top 7 score on either site. It's definitely nothing compared to what you're going to need from Kyle Larson at $11,300 on DraftKings or $14,000 on FanDuel. Instead of trying to sell me on Larson, there are people that are looking for a good reason to get off of Larson. Let's just say, as a not so much as a galaxy brain move, but as an ownership move in maybe single entry or 3 max. If you were going to sell somebody on the idea of getting off of Larson in these single or kind of smaller entry tournaments, what would you say?
I would say he was not the best car last week. I know he ended up winning the race. I mean, kind of just survival of the fittest at that point at the end, but he's still a great car. But guys like Tyler Reddick, Eric Jones, William Byron, Ryan Blaney, Joey Logano all posted better green flag speeds. Chase Elliott was also faster, but his green flag speed kind of got screwed up a little bit after some incidents during the race, but all those guys were faster than Larson in that race. And it's not out of the realm of possibility where he just doesn't lead laps today, runs top 5, which is fine in real life, but you're going to need more out of that in DFS. And Chase Elliott could easily come out and be the main dominator today and at much lower ownership, about half.
Yeah. Yeah. And, Chase is a very interesting driver to bring up. His betting odds, they are, I think they're ranking just second behind Larson in terms of outright odds, regardless of the site that you're looking at, and he's just a hair cheaper than Larson on both sites. Do you think that Elliott is probably the best, just kind of 1-for-1 pivot off of Larson, or would you be looking to go a little bit cheaper?
I would say just as far as a similar price, yes, because if you can get off of Larson to Chase, you're cutting that ownership in half in your lineup already. And with playing Chase, you can still easily get to a guy like Busch in your lineup or William Byron. So it's not that big of a deal. But if there was just another pivot from Chase Elliott, I'd say Ryan Blaney is right there with Elliott.
Yeah. Elliott's numbers, like, I don't think they're truly indicative of the driver or the car that he's had here. Like, I can remember just, a couple of previous Las Vegas races where he's gone out. I believe he's won the first stage, but then by the end of the race, he's had something wonky just happen to him that you really can't explain, and he's finishing in the teens or in the 20s. It's really kind of strange. And eventually, a driver to the caliber of Elliott will finally put one of those races together and probably end up winning this race. Let's talk about Denny Hamlin. Like, if there is somebody in this top 10 that isn't part of the Chevy mafia, and to a lesser degree, I think people are definitely looking to Chevys right now early, and then the Fords, but then people have their worries about the Toyotas, and I mean, it's definitely there. We all heard and saw plenty of chatter last week about overheating issues, and supposedly Toyota did some changes with their grill to try to adjust that, but you really don't know how that's going to come off after 267 laps. Out of all of these drivers in the top 10, in regards to Hamlin's ability to be a lap leader, how are you feeling about him versus the likes of a Reddick, a Logano, or really even an Elliott?
So from what we saw in the first race of the season that wasn't Daytona, it's kind of hard to really like Hamlin above these guys because we just didn't really see it because it's so fresh in our mind. But we got to keep in mind, Hamlin's one of the best drivers in the field. He's great at Las Vegas. The most recent race here at Vegas, he dominated and won that in the fall. And he's actually been quite incredible here. He has the most average laps led per race, some of the most fast laps, 3 top 5s, one of the best drive ratings. Like, he is very good at Vegas. And he's going to be forgotten about today. People don't want to click on him because his teammate Kyle Busch is right there, starting all the way back in 37th. You have William Byron, who we talked about, is getting a ton of ownership as the weekend progresses with his practice speeds. And I wouldn't say Hamlin did really anything spectacular this weekend that's going to make him a super popular play. So at $10,000, it's a pretty good buy low opportunity on Hamlin. It doesn't feel great, but he should not be someone you forget about as far as tournaments go.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Let's talk about a couple of the guys that I think are going to get kind of lost in the shuffle here. And that's Ricky Stenhouse Jr. starting 9th at 7,200 and Austin Dillon starting 10th at 8,000. Ricky had, I would say a so week last week, but for people with recency bias, they're really going to remember Austin Dillon and that late charge that he made last week. Believe that he finished second to Larson, and who knows, with maybe a few more laps if he would have been able to pull him in. Because of their starting position, both these guys have definitely a tough ladder to climb in order to kind of reach that periphery of what you need them to do in order to grab kind of the top 6 range fantasy scores. But do you see a path for either of these drivers to kind of do that for tournaments?
I mean, it's certainly possible. We know Stenhouse showed some speed last week, pulled on a P10, which, P10 is great for Stenhouse. The problem is he's starting 9th this weekend, so we're going to have to improve upon that. But Stenhouse is a guy that I think can compete in this next gen car. He's a very talented driver, and I think there's an outside chance he could pull off a top 8 here. Now, it's going to be tough, obviously, but he has a couple of top 10 finishes here at Vegas. I believe he had a top 5 very recently. It might have been last season. But both these guys, him and Austin Dillon, have pretty much been top 15 machines here at Vegas. Both guys typically perform pretty well at these track types. Stenhouse can be a little bit more hit or miss, but the upside is certainly there in tournaments for him. Wouldn't touch either in cash games, though.
Okay, yeah. That's definitely a good rule of thumb, is that if these guys are starting in the top 10, just stay away in regards to cash. Let's talk about the Awesemo Plus offer that we have going on right now. You can get an Awesemo Plus weekly pass for just $29.95, and that gets you access to nearly every DFS sport that is out there. This includes full access to all of the premium content and tools on Awesemo.com, including player projections, ownership projections, our premium Discord channel, lineup builder, and much more. Of course, if you're only looking to play NASCAR DFS, then you can sign up for one of our Awesemo Plus NASCAR packages for as low as $9.95 per week. If you guys had taken advantage of that this week, then you had all of these great these great tools. You had ownership projections, you had fantasy point projections, you had the rankings, you had the top driver tool for Friday night's truck race, for yesterday's Xfinity race, and for today's Cup race. That's $10 taking care of everything you need for a weekend's worth of racing action for just the $9.95. Please note that Fantasy Cruncher is an add-on and can be easily added onto these packages at checkout, but is not included in our base packages and is certainly a very valuable addition to your DFS arsenal. Stop guessing, start winning, join Awesemo Plus today. Want to pass on some news that I was just made aware of, and that is Daniel Hemrick is going to the rear. Thank you for that heads up there, Chris. Let's in fact, that's a great place to start, because Hemrick was a guy that throughout the day today, I just continue to see people like picking up steam on him. Like, yes, this is the cheap guy that I want access to. In fact, if people check out your article, he was the guy that you highlighted as a place of savings. Now that we know that Hemrick is going to the rear for an unapproved adjustment, how are you feeling about him?
It makes me feel less great about the play because I like the track position just to start with. And he posted top 8 practice speeds across the board. Problem is, every single time I drop exposure on a driver going for the rear, I get burnt every single time. It happens every time. But with the competition caution on lap 30, I think that can help him regroup. And by the time the caution rolls around, we're probably talking he's close to the top 20, top 25, and then hopefully gains a couple spots on pit road. So I don't think it's a big deal. Yeah, it's a little bit of it makes his path a little bit harder at the beginning, but I think it'll be fine.
Yeah, and that competition caution, like you said, I think it's really going to be big for anybody that has to go to the back, and it'll definitely help drivers like a Busch, a Hemrick, and a Reddick to be able to advance, come in, get some fresh tires, and advance a little bit further. Let's talk about another guy that is probably going to be one of the highest owned drivers today. And in fact, I started seeing the signs early this morning when I was consuming content, looking at what everybody was writing, and it seems like I was joking that if Larson isn't the highest owned driver, then he's going to be top 3. This might be the guy that pushes Larson out of the way in regards to ownership. And it's William Byron starting 14th. I know that you were high on him when you wrote him up in your picks article yesterday. He's a guy that didn't make my cash picks article just because, starting in that weird position, he doesn't have that much place differential to gain. And plus, I think really kind of in DraftKings cash today, you're prioritizing as much of the higher price place differential that you can get. But for those, because I have seen some detractors who think that, okay, this Byron pick, yes, it's getting chic, it's getting trendy, but I'm really not on board with it. Sell people on why William Byron should be like a pivotal piece to their ownership today.
So I feel like it's the same spot as last week. I know he ended up wrecking out, so it looks bad on paper, but Byron was about 10% owned last week, which is about 10% lower than what I thought it was going to be. He was starting in a similar spot, similar price point, and he went right through the field. He was 3rd in average green flag speed. He had a super fast car. He had a faster car than Larson. And now we're in a better spot this weekend. We're starting a few spots further back. He was fast at Vegas last season. I don't see why he's not going to be fast again this week. He showed it in practice. He was 1st and 2nd every single category. I mean, the fastest car in practice. Great at these track types. I really have nothing bad to say about William Byron. Team Hendrick has been the top dog. They showed that they're probably going to be the top dog once again, at least early in the season, last week at Auto Club. So assuming he doesn't wreck like last week, I don't see how Byron's not in the top 5 all day, picking up fast laps and maybe even getting up front.
Let's talk about another guy that was fast yesterday. And we know that you are not only a member, but you might also be the president of the Ryan Blaney fan club. Ryan Blaney's coming off the grid in the 11th position, 10,500 over here on DraftKings, 12,500 on FanDuel. His price might seem a little bit high to the average DraftKings player who knows who I think like when most people think of Ryan Blaney, at least I do, I think of a driver that's generally between that $9,500 to that $8,900 price range. But now he's, like he's more than Kyle Busch this week. Um, Ryan is definitely, it appears like the fastest of all of the four drivers. Is Blaney going to end up being a pivotal piece for your dominators today, like as a primary dominator, but especially as like a secondary?
Yeah, I like him a lot on both sides. He's just popping up in projections in the optimizer quite often. We know Team Penske, all these drivers have some very good track history here at Las Vegas. Not that I use track history too much, but it is nice to see. I mean, he's got 3 top 5s the past 6 races here. But like we talked about practice, he was very, very fast, top 3 in basically every single category besides a single lap. But that's not the most important thing. The long runs were definitely favorable to Ryan Blaney. And starting at 11th, he's kind of a similar play to William Byron, in my opinion. He was just about as fast as him last week, 4th in average green flag speed. And I assume that'll probably carry over to a degree. And you're going to get him at about half, maybe not quite half, but almost about half the ownership of William Byron. I feel like they have somewhat very, very similar upside.
Yeah, for sure. And uh, I wish I would have saved this tweet because it puts a lot of context into Auto Club. I know all of us were just tilting our faces off, like how could Ryan Blaney's pit crew just continually just cough up all of these positions on pit road? I think by the end of the race, somebody sent me a tweet that Blaney had lost over, it was somewhere in the neighborhood of like 60 plus positions during a 200 lap race, which just, it seems preposterous. But then somebody reached out to me and said that one of the things that they did setup wise made it tougher for the pit crew, and that's why they were having to take extra time. If anybody watching this like knows what that is in reference to, post it in the chat and I'll share it, because it makes more sense. Now, hopefully they haven't gone with that same sort of setup, because then we're just, I hate to say, but we may be burning money with our Blaney ownership if they're constantly going to be giving up 5 to 6 spots every single time that he has to come down pit road. Moving down the grid here, like Martin Truex Jr., he is a former winner here. He won that just I believe, if I look back here at the race sheets, yeah, he's won here within the last 3 years. He won the summer 2019 race. If people will remember, that was the first time that Las Vegas got to host a second race during a calendar season, and that race was just absolutely bananas. That was the race that should have told NASCAR, you cannot host a summer race at this track. It is too hot and slick. Everybody will flip out. Don't expect those kind of weather circumstances today. I believe the latest forecast I saw is that it's going to be mostly sunny with temperatures in the 60s. So there definitely should be a bit more grip than that race. But Truex, ownership wise, he's going to be a little bit lower down. One, because he's sandwiched in between all of these Chevy drivers that people like, and then we've got people's overall feelings about Toyota and their overheating issues. Do you have any kind of hope for Truex today as a potential lap leader?
So I got to fade someone, like some of these dominators, just to be overweight on the guys I like. And Truex is the guy I'm just not getting really any of. Like, yeah, he's a good driver at the mile and a half. In the past, I was always almost all the way in on Truex at these types of tracks, but the past season or so, he's just not a dominator. He's getting good finishes. I mean, 8 top 10s last year in 11 races at summer tracks, but 4 laps led per race, 7.5 fast laps. I need dominator points, and guys that he's priced around, I think, are way more likely, like William Byron, to do that.
Yeah, I hate to say it. I think I'm with you when it comes to a driver like Truex, and I might even kind of skew this way towards Hamlin, because it seems like the 2 times most recently here at Las Vegas that I've seen Hamlin peak have been in those late summer races. So there might be something about when this track is a little bit hotter, a little bit slicker, a little less grip, that he kind of peaks. But with these Toyota guys that are starting up front, I'm going to need to really kind of see it before I go and invest anymore. Now, things might change this week, and I might be back on board for Phoenix next week. But as far as these guys up front, like Hamlin and Truex, I think I'm there with you. There's got to be somebody unless you are really doing 150 lineups and you're trying to, nitpick some, ownerships out of everybody to try to cover all your bases. If you're just doing 20 max, you got to find people to get off of. And I'm with you. I don't have any true X. I've got maybe one lineup with Hamlin, and I could very easily talk myself out of that and move that to Blaney. We go down the grid here. We got a couple of drivers that I think people might be hesitant to play, namely Ross Chastain and Harrison Burton. Harrison's a little bit cheaper. I think people might be going towards him because he allows you to save money. Meanwhile, Ross, like, you can find a little bit more place differential if you go down the board. Are either of these drivers looking appealing to you in tournaments?
Yeah, just looking at the guys that are popping up in my lineups, I am not getting much Ross Chastain. I think he's a better play over on FanDuel. Only $5,500 seems way too cheap over there, being priced with guys like Hemrick, Bubba Wallace, and Harrison Burton. But as far as Burton goes on DraftKings, he is popping up quite a bit for me, around 15% of the time. It's just he's so cheap. And I mean, if you're afraid of Hemrick going to the rear, just adding more onto Burton, who's basically the same play, I don't mind doing that.
Yeah, that's a very good pivot. And you mentioned it before. Penske has run well here, and I can remember that. I believe it was Matty D. If it wasn't maybe this race last year, it was this race a couple of years ago. Like, I know he played the pit strategy game towards the end, because we had some really like wonky results with that race. I think it was a race that Joey won, but in the end, like, Bubba was in the top 5, Austin Dillon was in the top. It seemed like he was in the top 10, and I think Matty D had kind of done that same thing. So if we're using the Penske corollary, we're using kind of like Matty D as a baseline, then it makes sense that Harrison should be able to peak forward. I want to bring up a couple of super chats. The first one is thoughts on a lineup. This is for single entry. This has got a guy here in the top, the 11th through 20th positions that we haven't talked about yet. We've got Keselowski, Hamlin, Harvick, Larson, LaJoy, and Ty in a single entry. Let me give that back to you again. Keselowski, Hamlin, Harvick, Larson, LaJoy, and Ty Dillon. How are you feeling about that lineup for single entry?
It's almost a little too top heavy for me. I like having one of those 5K guys, LaJoy and I believe Ty Dillon, correct? Having two of them is a bit steep for me because I think the pricing is kind of softish up top. So maybe dropping one of the more expensive drivers like a Harvick down, or maybe a Hamlin, and maybe going more so mid-range, like just a little bit cheaper for someone that has somewhat similar upside. Because if you have Larson already and you already have Hamlin and Harvick, I feel like just dropping one of those guys and kind of balancing it out, maybe getting up to like a Justin Haley or maybe a Cole Custer, it'd make me feel a lot better with a more well-rounded lineup.
Yeah, I mean, if you just talk yourself through that lineup, you've got Larson, of course, dominating. You've got Harvick making his way from the mid-20s, probably into a top 5 finish, and then Hamlin is going to have to be like a secondary lap leader. He made the optimal lineup in the spring race last year, not as a true dominator, but I think just kind of getting partial fastest laps and laps led points. And then you're going to need probably a top 5 finish out of Keselowski, and then peaks out of LaJoy and Ty, like you said. Want to give you one more super chat to think over. What is your favorite value play for FanDuel single entry today?
Looking over to FanDuel, I'm trying to see my ownership that I have. So as far as my highest owned guy that is cheap, I believe it's going to be Justin. Yeah, I'm tied on Justin Haley and Daniel Hemrick with the 2 colleague cars. With Hemrick going to the back, if you want to lean towards Justin Haley, I think that's fine. He offers you more PD upside, and they should have somewhat similar finishing position upside. So as far as FanDuel goes, I go with Justin Haley, only $4,000 over there.
Yeah, it's a really good price for Justin Haley. Let's talk about our sponsor today, which is PrizePicks, which is daily fantasy made easy. Step 1, pick between 2 to 5 players, or in our case, drivers, regardless of sport. Step 2, choose their over-unders. And then step 3, watch your players win. For today's race, Chris has highlighted 2 drivers The first that we're going to look at here is Kurt Busch with an over projection of 47.5 fantasy points. Why do you like that number for Kurt?
So practice numbers look pretty solid, and he was like the one Toyota last week that actually didn't look terrible. I know he had to keep going to the back, but he was able to work his way, and he was just passing cars the entire time. And practice times were like top 12 this weekend, and to get over 47 points, we are looking at around a top 13, which if you look at Kurt Busch's history at the mile and a half and just large intermediates, he is typically a top 10 driver, and hopefully Toyota has fixed their issues, and if he doesn't have to keep going to the rear once again, I think he should be smooth sailing inside the top 15, throwing some fast laps mixed in there. Hopefully, I think that 47.5 looks pretty good.
Yeah, like if it's funny, that was his really kind of first non-drafting oval race in a Toyota, and Kurt looked the best out of all of the Toyota drivers. And the next driver we're going to highlight here is William Byron with a little bit higher fantasy point projection of 54.5, but it looks like you're taking the over with him as well.
Yeah, it's certainly very high, but I currently have him projected him in the 60s. I am giving him lap sled points and fast laps. I am fully on board with William Byron picking up some dominator points. And I would be shocked if he is not a top 3 car today. And if he does that, he is going to, if dominator points did not exist, for him to get over 54.5 points, we are talking a top 2 finish, which I think is certainly possible. I would not be surprised if Larson and Byron are the top 2 today. Throw in some fast laps. As long as he stays clean, I think he'll be just fine.
Yeah, and that's a good point worth bringing up to people, is that if you played PrizePicks last season and you haven't done so this season, they have done scoring changes that better reflect kind of where the DFS realm is. They're awarding points now for fastest laps. They're awarding more points for leading laps, for place differential. Like whatever your process is, just say going into DraftKings, you can probably take that same process and apply it to PrizePicks and be definitely profitable. For new users, get up to a $100 deposit match bonus with promo code Awesemo. And currently, when you make your first deposit at PrizePicks, Awesemo will sweeten the deal by giving you a free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. But you must use the link on the Awesemo promo page to help expedite this process. Let's move on to drivers starting 21st through 30th. The first driver that I want to tackle is everybody's new sweetheart, Erik Jones. I think people were anticipating Erik dropping another hot qualifying lap, starting in the top 10, but he finds himself back here in 23rd. The only problem is that his price is a bit elevated to reflect his new Vegas odds. Like currently, if you move yourself over to DraftKings Sportsbook, Erik has lower odds than Christopher Bell, which is something that I didn't think that I would see. And if you go to BetMGM, he has, I believe, he's got, Erik is sitting at 20-1 to win, while Kevin Harvick is just barely above that at 18-1 to win. It's a wild world we live in when Erik Jones is getting hyped up again and people are climbing in the mentions of Joe Gibbs Racing saying, how could you let this driver go? And we played this game like every 5 or 6 races, and then Erik kind of falls back to earth because he's driving petty equipment. But maybe this year things will be different. So, Mr. Chris, how are we feeling about Erik in cash and in tournaments at this salary?
So I'll be honest, last weekend, I did not like Erik Jones. I did not believe in the speed. And, well, I think we saw what happened. He was first in average green flag speed last weekend, and I don't want to completely dismiss it. Do I think he's going to be the fastest car on the track again? No, but I don't think that speed's just going to randomly disappear. And we have very few data points to look at, so I'm going to have to at least consider it. And starting all the way back in 23rd, $7,300. The price is a little bit steep. I would not be playing it last year, but I think this year's going to be a little bit more different. We have more parity in the cars, and Jones is a talented driver. If you guys have ever seen any of my content before, I'm a pretty big Erik Jones fan. I just don't like him in the 43 car, but he had speed last weekend. I think he's a fringe cash play, but you can play him in any format today. But I've been kind of leaning more so towards tournaments the way my roster construction looks like. But I know last year at Vegas in the first race, he had a very strong run as well. And I wouldn't be surprised if that happens again.
Yeah, that was something that I was being cognizant of when I was building my lineups, is that, yes, it was the Gen 6 car with the 550 horsepower and the high down and the high downforce. But I mean, as a single car team leaning upon Richard Childress Racing, like they were Eric was started in the 20s, kind of similar to this, and then was able to legitimately drive himself into the top 10. And with the new speed that they have, like it seems that all the Chevys are kind of working in cahoots with each other, trying to make this transition a little bit easier for them. And if that's what's going on, then it definitely explains why he ran so strong last week, why his green flag average ranks just continue to be really, like I think they're top 10 at the Coliseum, at Daytona, and then last week at Auto Club. It makes sense that they'll show up again really well this week. Let's talk about Kevin. Kevin did not show me what I wanted to see in practice. Those practice numbers were not good. I am telling myself a story that those practice speeds were bad because he is set up for a long run. Is this a story that you can tell yourself in hopes of him having a good day, or are you afraid that what we saw in practice is indicative of what we're going to see in today's race?
So I've been telling myself a different story. I'm trying to get off of Kevin Harvick because I want to get more so on Kurt Busch. I want to get more Alex Bowman. I want to get more of the like William Byron, someone in a similar range. So I have not that high on Kevin Harvick. If he's going to, just for example, if he's 23% today, I'm looking to play around 15%, maybe a little bit lower, just to get more leverage on guys like Bowman, who I think will have a much faster car. Because we kind of got lucky last week with Kevin Harvick. He was not good. He was running like in the 20s for the majority of the race. Just attrition got him there at the end. And I'm not sure if the luck's going to be there this week. I'm not sure we're going to have a bunch of cautions like we saw at Auto Club. So I am personally going on the underweight route on Kevin Harvick. And the practice speeds, wow, Kevin Harvick was never a guy that really, his practice speeds mattered too much. It's just something, it's just the story I'm rolling with this weekend.
Yeah, and I think, judging by a tweet that I posted earlier, I think a lot of people are with you. When I was looking at my lineups on DraftKings and 20 max, I was sitting at about 35%, and I thought, man, do I need to bump that up, because he does have access to place differential? And when I said, is that too high or just right? And people like 100% said that's too high. Like I think people are kind of out on Harvick, and they saw what you saw last week. You know, if you played Harvick in cash like I did, we luck boxed. I mean, we fell into that and it worked out, but there's definitely no guarantee, especially if you're going back to Harvick in cash, that he's going to be able to matriculate his way forward into the top 10 and replicate what he was able to do last week. We go down the field here. You know, you've talked about Haley. We both really like Haley at that price. Chris Buescher is a guy that I wrote up in my cash game article. I think that out of all the guys in his price range, I think that his ownership is the one that's going to get steamed the most as people look at that past history. They recognize the name. I bet people oddly feel safer about a Roush Fenway driver at that salary than they do at Cole Custer, just a little bit more. But I mean, I like Cole Custer just the same. Getting a little bit off board, let's talk about the Biff. Greg Biffle overqualified in my eyes. I fully expected him to be starting in the 30s, but you know, he had a respectable practice time and he's starting 26th. His salary really isn't that crazy at $5,500 on DraftKings and $3,500 on FanDuel. As a salary saver and a potential pivot off of guys like Ty Dillon, Michael McDowell, the Hemricks, the Burtons, is there any path for you to have like even just a couple of shares of Greg Biffle in tournaments today?
Yeah, I have a handful. I'm not very confident. Just the starting spot's going to be really rough. And starting in 26, I'm not sure how much I trust the 44 car. I would much rather, Ty Dillon feels way safer to me. I mean, he's been doing it in the Cup Series more recently. He had I forget where he finished last week, but I know it wasn't too bad for where he started. I mean, yeah, 17th at Auto Club last weekend, which if he did something similar this weekend, starting all the way back in 32nd, $5,600 is a pretty good price point for Ty. But yeah, Greg Biffle, yeah, the practice speed wasn't terrible. I'm just not starting in 26, it's a pretty steep path for him to be optimal. He's going to need attrition. He's going to need what guys like Garrett Smithley had last week, where Smithley's posting like around close to a top 20 score. Just have to survive wrecks, but I'm not really expecting that to happen this weekend.
Yep. Let's get to an interesting question here that we just got in the chat. We just mentioned him. We talked about how we both like Eric Jones. Heads up, how do you feel about Jones versus Bubba on DraftKings today?
Yeah, I would much rather take Eric Jones. Now it's a bit of a price difference. I believe it's about $1,000 different, but as long as price isn't an issue,
Yeah,
I have Eric Jones projected several points higher. You have more PD upside, and Eric Jones, I just feel is a better driver.
Yeah, what is their salary discrepancy on FanDuel? Because I bet yeah. I mean, Eric is 8,500 on FanDuel. Bubba's $5,000. Like, yeah, I'm there with you. Like the salary discrepancy is too much. Like if these two were closer, then this might be a little bit more of a debate. But I don't think there's going to be really any lineups that you're going to have unless you're just chasing place differential in hopes that this is a wreck fest today, where you're really going to be making that sort of decision. Going back here to the rest of the drivers in this starting range, the question was brought up about the single entry lineup featuring Corey LaJoie. He starts 29th today. I think the only thing I can really say about Corey is that he's cheap. I mean, he's 5,100. He gives you access to high priced place differential and or dominators. Of these guys that are in the lower 5K range, like let's do this thought exercise. We've got Michael McDowell at 5,300. We've got the Biff at 55. We've got Corey at 51, and then we've got Todd Gilliland at 5,000. Ranking those four, how do you feel about LaJoie versus those other three?
LaJoie's not a guy I'm a big fan of, and like you said, about the nicest thing you can say about him is that he's cheap and he's starting pretty far back in 29th. Like LaJoie, a good day for LaJoie is if he's hanging around the top 25, which is something he's certainly capable of doing to finish 28th last week. Last race at Vegas, not the same exact car, but same team and everything, finished 30th. I'm not huge. I'd rather play Todd Gilliland. I'd rather play McDowell personally, and that will reflect on my exposures today. I do like LaJoie more than Biffle, but it is close. But I'm not really on LaJoie. He's more of just I'm trying to get different because I don't want 20% of Gilliland, so I'll have 10% LaJoie, 12% Gilliland just to mix it up back there.
Yeah, I really like Corey LaJoie, and I had a lot of hope that this new car would be able to breathe some new life into Spire, but I'm not going to look at Daytona as anything indicative of the season. But Corey didn't look good last week. Josh Bilicki definitely didn't look good last week. Now, maybe if Bilicki doesn't end up spinning through the grass, it's a different story. But I am afraid that what we had from Spire last year is what we're getting from Spire this year. And maybe when we get somebody different in the 77, somebody besides Josh Bilicki that can give some different information to this team, maybe things improve. But I bet for the majority of the season, the 77 is just going to be whoever had the most money to buy out that seat, and it's probably not going to be helping out Corey LaJoie all that much. Want to remind people, if you are on the Twitter machine, give me a follow at RaceSheets DFS. If you're on there, look up Chris Pennell. He is Chris Pennell 16. An account that you should not forget to look up is Awesemo's own NASCAR-related account. That is going to be at Awesemo NASCAR. Stay up to date with the latest news. All of the articles that me and Chris and our team of writers do, those are going to get published from that account. That will help you stay up to date with everything that is going on here at Awesemo. So let's get into drivers 31 through 37, and quite frankly, we could give the entire next 10 minutes to one driver because what you do with him today may very well dictate the kind of like you may have a good evening tonight or you may have a bad evening tonight, and it all may spur from what your ownership on Kyle Busch was. So, Chris, tell us what happened to Kyle yesterday, what we know about this vehicle, and how it's affecting your process with him today.
So if you guys are watching practice, very early on, Kyle Busch destroyed his car in the rear, ended up going to a backup car, and the backup car is apparently a parts car that had Denny Hamlin's name on it. So we saw a big hunk of metal on Bob's Twitter. Didn't look too promising, but they got the wrap on it last night. And I know me and Phill were talking about it, but with the new car, it should be easy to be able to adjust things like that. So I'm not overly concerned about it. I know some people, I'm sure, are going to be a little bit wary, which is understandable because if he's just going to ride around in P15 all day, can't make his way to the front, guys like Larson, Elliott, Byron at similar price points can be a much better play because they offer you dominator potential. But I'm not overly concerned about it. If you were playing cash games today, you were playing Kyle Busch. He's still in a JGR car. He's one of, if not the most talented driver in the field. I know it hasn't been a great start of the season for him, but starting dead last at $10,200. If there was no issue with this car, you would be looking at like 60, 70% owned Kyle Busch, but you're getting him at like maybe low to mid 40s today, which is something you could definitely take advantage of.
Yeah, like there definitely is just so much upside with Kyle. And if he races his way to the front, like we're talking about a driver that has finished in the top 3 in 3 of the past 6 Las Vegas races. The last time that he won here, interestingly enough, was 2009, and I believe that's the only time that he's won at Las Vegas in the Cup Series. But like he doesn't have to win today. He probably doesn't even really need to crest like top 3. I think as long as he can find his way to maybe top 7 or top 8 with all of that place differential, and especially if Larson does what he's capable of doing, then it's going to be so tough for Busch to fail. But there is, granted, some risk because we don't know just what this car truly is capable of. I'm taking the stand that this car is going to be fine. I'm currently sitting at somewhere around 50% in DraftKings for my 20 max. Like I don't want to totally invest all in case this is a bad car that Kyle can't do anything with. But I mean the ability of him to reach that ceiling, it's gonna be so easy. In this range, we've got some guys that people are probably not playing. We've got Cody Ware starting 33rd, Josh Bilicki, as I mentioned, starting 34th. We've got Mr. McLeod starting 35th, and Garrett Smithley starting 36th. Do any of these guys interest you whatsoever?
As I usually say with Jason on the show, we always say this at the end. If you're building like 1 to 3 lineups and you're ending up getting to where you had to play one of these guys, you need to start over and start building a new lineup. Because I just don't see a scenario where these guys are optimal today.
Yeah, I think that if you have these guys in your lineup, then you really have to question just what kind of story your lineup is telling. And that story with these guys in there is probably expecting a lot of chaos that probably won't happen today. Remember, this is going to be yes, the track is worn down, and yes, we've got the Goodyear tire issues that we're kind of concerned about, especially since they don't have interliners anymore. But it's going to be cooler. There's going to be more grip, and we shouldn't be seeing just random people spinning out. Because I think that was probably the biggest takeaway for me is last week at Auto Club. Granted, there was wind during practice, but I mean, we had during the qualifying session, I believe we had 9 different drivers spin out during their practice session. And fast forward to yesterday during practice, and Kyle was really the only guy that had any sort of issue, and his was because the tire went down and he went into the wall. So, playing these 4 guys, I think, is a bit of a bet on attrition that we're probably not anticipating today. Not many other guys to address in this range, but we will get to the guy that I think a lot of people are going to be playing today, and that is Kurt Busch. Kurt Busch starting 31st, 8,900 on DraftKings, 9,200 on FanDuel. Is Kurt pretty much, besides Kyle, just like an auto click and cash for you today?
Yeah, I'm just a big fan of all the Bushes today in cash. I like Chris Buescher, I like Kyle Busch, I like Kurt Busch. So I'm very familiar with the Bushes today. Just give me the PD upside. Like we talked about earlier, Kurt looked like the best Toyota last week, kept driving through the field, didn't have good track position to start. It's in the back, had to do the pass through penalty, and he still gave you a top 10 finish, which is what he typically does at these types of tracks. And I don't think it's going to be any different at his home track in Vegas tonight.
That is the NASCAR DFS stack that I didn't know I needed in my life. Give me all the Bushes, and quite frankly, I think my ownerships are gonna suggest the exact same thing. Let's get to this question featuring the guy that we just talked about. You've got Kurt Busch starting 31st at 8,900. And then we've got Alex Bowman, a driver that we really didn't touch on that much at 8,700, but starts a whole lot closer to the front in 13th. If you were doing a single entry lineup and you had to choose between Busch or Bowman, who is the guy that's getting your click?
Just raw points wise, not factoring anything else. I'm going with Kurt Busch today. If I already have a chalky lineup, I got like Kyle Busch, Byron, all those chalky guys. I'm going to slide with Bowman just to try to get my lineup off a complete chalk train. So it really depends on what the rest of your lineup looks like. But head to head, I'm going to take Kurt Busch there with the 31st place starting position.
Yeah, I think I'm on board with you. Circling back, how do you feel about Alex Bowman as a potential lap leader today?
So when I'm rostering Bowman, that he does always have a chance to lead laps, but I'm not really rostering him as a guy that's going to come out and lead laps. I'm hoping he gets some fast laps, and I'm hoping he runs top 5. The lap sled would be nice, but that's not something he typically does at these track types. I mean, dating back to last season, we're talking half a lap led per race at 1.5s and 2-mile tracks. He does have some fast laps mixed in there, but on a Hendrick car below 9K, starting at 13th, I'm willing to take some shots that he can just run top 5 with his buddies Larson, Elliott, and Byron today.
Yeah, that's good. I want to bring Daniel Hemrick back into this conversation. One, because we've got a question in the YouTube chat. Is Hemrick now a fade with him going to the rear? Just got here, so I'm not sure if it has already been answered. I will add on to that I just perused the Discord and saw that Hemrick is on the grid. So it looks like whatever changes they had to do have been done. So it looks like he's good to go. But how are you feeling about Hemrick for those who are just joining us since he's going to the rear?
So I do agree it sucks that he's going to lose track position to start, but if he has a fast car, he should be fine. We're not playing Hemrick to dominate. As long as he's there by like stage 2, stage 3, running inside the top 16, top 15, that's why we played Hemrick. I played him to hold his position and maybe gain a couple spots, and the competition caution at the beginning of the race is certainly going to help shuffle some things around. So I think he'll be fine, not a big deal. And usually fading drivers that go to the rear ends up being a bad strategy.
Yep. All right, as we prepare to close up shop today, I want to remind everybody, give us a like and a subscription so you can keep up to date with all of our shows. Want to thank our sponsor, PrizePicks, today. Don't forget to take advantage of that promo, especially if you have not made a first-time deposit there. That is a really stinking good deal. And be sure to join us later for NBA Deeper Dive and Live Before Lock with the three E's and Terry as they get you ready for today's slate. And a big shout out to our man Jordan Klein behind the glass, taking care of your phone calls and screening everybody today. I want to get through a few more questions today, scanning, and if you are still joining us, if you have any questions, post those in the YouTube chat. I'm also looking here at Discord, trying to find some questions. Something new to add via our man Bob Pockras, Custer to the rear for unapproved adjustments. Does that change your view on Custer whatsoever?
He was pretty close to the back anyway, starting in 24th, and I'm just playing him purely for a top 20, so that doesn't change any thought process on Custer.
Okay, yeah. Like Custer, not worried about him whatsoever. Let's talk about lineup construction. If you are trying to avoid potential chalk, what are you more likely to do? Avoid Larson or avoid Kyle Busch?
I'd rather avoid Kyle Busch because if you can grab, like, let's just say, for example, Kyle Busch gets a top 15. Sure, that's great. It's a solid fantasy day. But if you play William Byron instead and he comes out, leads some laps, and wins the race, the ceiling is much higher, in my opinion, because I think Byron much more likely to lead laps and dominate rather than Kyle Busch today. So I'd rather get off Kyle Busch, take my lap sled, most likely with Larson, pair him up with another guy that can dominate, and the ceiling is much higher.
Awesome. Let's get to a super chat from Eddie. Thank you. His question: Hemrick or Ty Dillon?
Makes it tougher with him going to the rear, but I still think Daniel Hemrick has the higher finishing position upside. So if it's a tournament, I'm going to start with Hemrick still.
Awesome. We got a FanDuel question. It's a good game theory one. Daniel Suarez, Austin Dillon, or leave $900 on the table and take Briscoe, a man we have definitely not talked about.
I would end up taking Austin Dillon there. I don't think we talked about Austin Dillon really much whatsoever besides the beginning, but on FanDuel with place differential not being as important, Austin Dillon is a top 10, top 15 machine. So if he can just hold his ground, it's a decent day over on FanDuel.
Yeah. Let's get to another super chat from Eddie. Thank you. Best two pay ups and best two pay downs for a DK GPP.
So if I'm just building one lineup, like just hand building, the two guys I land up on the most up top, I'm looking at Kyle Larson, looking at Kyle Busch. It's very close to William Byron, but I would side with Kyle Busch just for the safety. And then down low, I found myself going to Justin Haley a lot and Chris Buescher.
Awesome. And with that, folks, we are going to close out to give you and us time to finalize these lineups, give them one last look through before they lock. Thank you guys for joining us once again. It has been a pleasure to host this show, and good luck to everybody with your DFS pursuits this afternoon.